What began as small talk between neighbors, became something neither of us expected. I just moved into my first apartment, boxes still half unpacked, life still a little uncertain. Then there was her. The woman next door. She was calm, self-assured, and carried the kind of quiet grace that draws you in before you realize it. I didn't know her story then, or how deeply she'd soon become part of mine. I moved in on a Thursday afternoon, the kind of day that smells like new beginnings and cardboard boxes. My apartment still echoed with emptiness. A few plants by the window, a stack of books on the floor, and a kettle that refused to whistle properly. I hadn't even met anyone in the building yet. It was quiet, almost too quiet, until I heard the faint sound of music from next door. Old jazz. Soft, playful, confident. When I stepped into the hallway later that evening, she was there. My new neighbor. She stood barefoot on the doormat, holding a small paint roller and a half-empty mug of coffee. Her hair was tied loosely, a few strands brushing against her cheek. Mid-40s, maybe, graceful, composed, and yet there was something unguarded about her eyes. She looked at me and smiled like she already knew I was awkward about introductions. "New here?" she asked, her voice low and melodic, the kind that makes you forget what you were about to say. I nodded, managing a small smile. "Just moved in. I think I might be your new wallmate." She laughed softly. "Then I owe you an apology. I've been repainting, so if you hear any noise, blame my poor DIY skills." "It's fine," I said. "Honestly, I kind of like the sound. Makes the place feel alive." That made her pause for a second, her expression softening in a way I didn't expect. She looked at me, really looked, before handing me the mug in her hand. "You look like you could use some caffeine. Welcome to the neighborhood." I hesitated but accepted it. Her fingers brushed mine for the briefest moment, warm, steady, deliberate, and something about that simple touch stayed with me far longer than it should have. She introduced herself as Elena. Just Elena. No last name, no details, just that gentle smile and a casual, "I'm next door if you need anything." When she turned to leave, the faint scent of jasmine and paint lingered in the air. I stood there longer than I meant to, watching her door close, realizing I was smiling for no reason at all. That night, I tried to focus on unpacking, but my attention drifted to the wall we shared. Every now and then, I'd hear soft footsteps, the hum of her music, the occasional laugh, a sound that carried warmth even through plaster and brick. It felt strange, comforting, and oddly intimate, like I was part of a rhythm I didn't yet understand. I didn't know it then, but that small moment, her laughter through the wall, that borrowed mug cooling on my table, would be the quiet beginning of something I could never have planned. Something that would blur the lines between friendship, affection, and everything in between. The first few days passed quietly, marked by the soft hum of daily life, a kettle whistling, footsteps in the hall, the steady rhythm of rain against my window. But the walls in this building were thin, and through them, I began to know Elena in small, unspoken ways. I could tell she liked to play old records at night, jazz, sometimes soul. I heard her humming softly to herself, her voice smooth and low, almost hypnotic. It wasn't intrusive. If anything, it felt comforting. Like a heartbeat just on the other side of my wall. One evening, as I was making coffee, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, she stood there in casual clothes, a loose cardigan, hair still damp from a shower. She held an empty jar in her hand. "Do you happen to have any sugar?" she asked, smiling in that easy, effortless way that made me forget simple words. I nodded quickly. "Yeah, of course." She followed me inside, glancing around as if she didn't want to intrude but couldn't help being curious. "So this is the bachelor's nest next door," she teased, stepping lightly across the floor. "Still working on making it look like someone actually lives here," I replied, handing her the sugar. She leaned against the counter, watching me. "You'll get there. It just takes time, and a few good neighbors." There was a pause, a quiet one that didn't feel awkward. Just, aware. Then she smiled again and added playfully, "Careful, boy. I might just steal your firsts." I laughed, unsure what she meant, or maybe pretending not to. My firsts? Her eyes met mine, steady and amused. First dinner with a neighbor. First real conversation in this apartment. First time someone tells you when your music's too loud. She said it like a joke, but there was something behind her smile, a flicker of loneliness she tried to hide beneath humor. We ended up on her balcony later that night, mugs of coffee warming our hands. The city stretched out below, lights flickering like tiny stars trying to be seen. She talked about her divorce in a calm, almost detached way, how it wasn't bitter, just empty. "You get used to quiet," she said, staring out into the night. "But some nights, quiet feels too heavy." I didn't know what to say, so I just listened. The wind picked up, brushing a few strands of her hair against my arm. She didn't move them away. Neither did I. When I finally went back to my apartment, I stood by the shared wall again, listening to the faint hum of her record spinning. The music was slow, romantic, the kind that lingers in the air even after it ends. And as I sat there, alone but strangely content, I realized I wasn't just hearing her anymore. I was beginning to feel her presence, steady, close, and quietly changing the rhythm of my days. It's strange how small things start to feel significant when someone occupies your thoughts. With Elena, it wasn't grand gestures, it was the rhythm of little moments that quietly stitched her into my days. Every morning, I'd hear her door open just as I was leaving for work. She always had a cup of coffee in hand, hair loosely tied, that same jasmine scent drifting through the hallway. Sometimes she'd catch my eye and smile, sometimes she'd just nod, like we shared an unspoken secret, that the day already felt a little better because we'd seen each other. By now, our conversations had become effortless. Short exchanges in the elevator. A wave across the parking lot. A few words over the balcony railing. She had this rare ability to make the simplest things feel intimate. Then came the rainy afternoon. The kind that soaks the whole city in silver light. The power flickered once, twice, and I was about to make tea when there was another knock on my door. Elena stood there holding a small screwdriver and an embarrassed smile. "Do you know how to fix a shelf?" she asked. Mine decided to give up on life. I couldn't help but smile back. "Sure. Lead the way." Her apartment felt different from mine, lived in, warm. Framed photos on the shelves, soft lighting, the faint scent of something floral in the air. The shelf in question hung loosely on the wall, a few screws barely holding it in place. I got to work, tightening the screws while she knelt beside me, handing tools, making quiet conversation. Her presence was calming, like background music you don't realize you've started humming along to. At one point, as I reached for the last screw, the shelf tilted slightly, and she instinctively steadied it, her hand brushing mine. Her skin was soft, warm. The touch was brief, accidental maybe, but it sent a current through me strong enough to make my heart stutter. When I glanced up, she was already looking at me, eyes softer than usual, a small smile at the corner of her lips. "You're good at this," she said quietly. "Most men your age would have called someone instead." "Maybe I just needed an excuse to help my neighbor," I replied, half joking but meaning every word. Her laugh was light, but it lingered in the air between us like perfume. When the shelf was fixed, she stood back, admiring it. "You saved me again," she said. "Coffee or tea as a thank you?" I chose tea, though I barely tasted it. I was too aware of her, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, how her fingertips brushed the edge of her cup, the soft rise and fall of her breathing in the quiet. When I finally left, the rain had stopped. The air outside smelled clean, alive. And even though her door had closed, I could still feel her presence beside me, the echo of her voice, the warmth of that fleeting touch. That night, the space between our apartments didn't feel like a wall anymore. It felt like a heartbeat, steady, shared, and growing stronger. A few days passed after the rain, and I tried convincing myself things hadn't changed, that the warmth I felt when I thought of her was nothing unusual. But the truth was, everything had shifted a little. Elena felt closer now, even when she wasn't around. One evening, just as the sun was melting into the horizon, she knocked on my door again. This time, she wasn't holding a mug or a tool. She held a covered dish and a mischievous smile. "Dinner," she said. "You can't keep living on instant noodles and frozen pizza. Consider this my apology for making you fix my shelf." I laughed, stepping aside to let her in. "You didn't have to, shoo," she interrupted gently, her tone playful but soft. "Just sit. I'll handle it." She moved around my kitchen with quiet confidence, uncovering roasted vegetables and something that smelled like rosemary and garlic. Watching her there, sleeves rolled up, humming under her breath, felt strangely domestic, like a glimpse of a life I hadn't realized I wanted. When we finally sat down, the lights were low, and the fading glow from the window bathed her in gold. She looked peaceful. Not trying, not performing, just herself. We talked easily at first, small things, light things. Then the conversation deepened. She asked about my family, my work, the things I wanted from life. I told her I was still figuring that out, that sometimes it felt like I was waiting for something but didn't know what. She smiled faintly, swirling the wine in her glass. "That feeling doesn't go away, you know. Even when you think you found what you want, life has a way of asking, 'Are you sure?'" Her honesty drew me in. There was no pretense, no need to impress, just truth. I asked about her marriage, gently, not prying. She didn't flinch. "It ended quietly," she said. "No fights, no betrayal. Just two people drifting too far apart to find their way back." She looked at me then, really looked, her gaze steady but soft. "You start to forget what it's like to be seen. That's the hardest part." I didn't know how to respond. So I said the only thing that felt right. "You deserve to be seen, Elena." For a moment, silence settled between us, thick but tender. Then she reached across the table to pour more wine, her fingers brushing my wrist, deliberate, almost testing. The touch was light, but it lingered. My pulse jumped. She noticed. Her lips curved into a knowing smile. "Careful," she whispered, half teasing. "You might make me believe you mean that." "I do," I said quietly. The air between us stilled, not heavy, not awkward, just full. When she finally stood to leave, she paused at the door and looked back at me, her voice softer now. "Next time, you cook." I smiled. "I'll try not to burn it." She laughed, a sound that stayed with me long after she was gone, long after the scent of rosemary faded from my kitchen. That night, for the first time, I realized I didn't just like being near her. I needed to be. The storm had passed, but its memory lingered, the faint scent of rain in the hallway, the damp hush of morning settling over everything. I woke earlier than usual, drawn by a feeling I couldn't name. I found myself standing outside her door before I even realized I'd walked there. I almost turned back, but then it opened. Elena stood there, wrapped in a soft robe, her hair slightly tousled, eyes tired yet kind. She didn't seem surprised to see me, only quiet, calm, as if she'd been expecting this silence between us. "Coffee?" she asked softly. I nodded. Inside, her apartment felt different, softer somehow. The candles from the night before were still there, their wax melted into small pools. The air smelled of coffee and rain. I sat at the table while she moved around the kitchen, the faint clink of cups and spoons filling the quiet like music. When she placed the mug in front of me, our fingers brushed again. It was such a small thing, yet it carried the weight of everything we hadn't said. For a while, we just sat there, two people suspended in a moment that felt fragile, almost sacred. Then she broke the silence. "You know, Sometimes I think I forgot how to just sit with someone. To be seen without feeling like I owe an explanation. I looked at her, really seeing her, the fine lines by her eyes, the softness in her expression, the strength beneath her calm. "You don't owe me anything," I said quietly. "I'm just glad to be here." She smiled faintly, but her eyes glistened. "You're kind," she whispered. "But you don't know what it's like. People see me and think I should have it all figured out by now. They don't understand that starting over doesn't come with instructions." Her voice cracked just slightly, and without thinking, I reached across the table. My hand found hers, steady, warm. "You don't have to figure it out alone." For a moment, she didn't move. Then her fingers turned, curling into mine. It wasn't a romantic gesture, not exactly. It was something deeper, quieter. Like two hearts finally breathing at the same pace. The light through the curtains shifted, spilling golden across her face. She looked at me then, not as the boy next door, not as someone younger, but as someone who had seen her, truly seen her. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know," I said softly. "Me too." We sat like that, hands entwined, words no longer needed. The storm outside had ended, but inside, something new had begun, something calm, grounded, and undeniably real. When I left her apartment, I carried that warmth with me. Not excitement, not infatuation, something steadier. Something that felt like belonging. And as the morning sun broke through the clouds, I knew that whatever came next wouldn't be rushed or uncertain. Because for the first time, it wasn't about chasing what could be, it was about cherishing what already was. The days that followed felt lighter, quieter, not empty, but full in a softer way. The rhythm between us had changed again. There were no grand gestures, no confessions, no promises whispered in haste. Just simple presence, and that was enough. Elena and I started walking together in the evenings. Sometimes we'd talk, sometimes we wouldn't. The world around us seemed to fade into the background, the hum of passing cars, the rustle of leaves, the golden hue of dusk melting into night. I found comfort in the quiet between our words, in the gentle rhythm of our steps aligning. She laughed more now. Not the careful, polite laughter I'd first heard through the walls, but something freer, the kind that came from somewhere deeper. Every time I saw that smile, something inside me steadied. One evening, we stopped by the small park near our building. The air smelled faintly of wet grass and blooming jasmine. We sat on a bench, watching children chase each other near the swings, parents calling softly from nearby. She leaned back, her arm resting along the back of the bench, her fingers brushing lightly against my shoulder. "I used to come here when things got heavy," she said quietly. "Just to remind myself that life keeps moving, that laughter still exists somewhere, even when you can't find it." I turned to look at her. "And now?" She smiled, eyes distant but soft. "Now I don't come here to forget. I come to breathe." A breeze drifted past, carrying the faint sound of laughter, and her hair brushed against my face. I wanted to reach out, to tuck it behind her ear, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I let the moment breathe, the closeness, the quiet understanding. When the sky began to fade to twilight, we walked home slowly. At the entrance to our building, she paused, her hand still resting near mine. The soft glow from the hallway lights made her eyes seem almost golden. "I never meant to get attached," she said with a small, almost guilty smile. "Neither did I admitted. But I'm glad I did." Something shifted in her expression, that same look from our first dinner, the one that carried both strength and fear. She stepped closer, close enough for me to feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Her fingers brushed my cheek, tracing lightly, as if memorizing something fragile. Then she leaned in and kissed me, not urgently, not as a beginning, but as an acknowledgement. A quiet acceptance. When she pulled back, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Careful, boy," she said, that teasing tone returning, softer now, I might just steal your firsts after all. I smiled, meeting her gaze. I think you already have. She laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that feels like home. And as she turned to unlock her door, I stood there a moment longer, letting her words settle deep within me. She hadn't stolen anything. She'd simply taught me what it meant, to feel, to care, to love without fear. And when her door finally closed, the scent of jasmine lingered in the hallway, a reminder that sometimes, the most beautiful beginnings arrive long after the storms have passed. If you felt something in this story, if you've ever believed that love can find you when you least expect it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Every story here is a little reminder that connection doesn't care about age, timing, or rules, it just finds us when our hearts are ready. Thank you for listening. See you in the next story.